Everyone. Today for book club, I want to talk about another journal article with you guys. And the journal article that I want to touch upon today is an article titled Camouflage and Masking Behavior in Adult Autism. It's written by Javad Alagband-Rat and colleagues, and it has been published in 2023, so it's still a relatively recent journal article. Interestingly, what they did is they did a systematic review. So they pulled together a lot of different studies that existed in the adult autism space, and they looked at what are the overall patterns that emerge from this bunch of research studies, right? The main thing that they observed is that in the 16 or across the 16 articles that they included in their study, camouflaging or masking seem to be more common, not surprisingly perhaps for those of you who are neurodivergent, in women. Right? Especially in women who are relatively well educated, cognitively very able, masking or camouflaging is a very common occurrence. And I guess what I want to talk a bit about today is I guess kind of how masking plays into diagnosis and misdiagnosis for women and girls especially, right? So a lot of the diagnostic process when it comes to autism, but also when it comes to other types of neurodiversity like ADHD, for example, or dyslexia or dysgraphia, we often see that women are diagnosed much later in their lives. And one contributing variable to that is that women are, for many reasons, much more adept at masking than men. So some reasons for that are kind of societal expectations and kind of socialization from early on that places a much larger emphasis on women fitting in, being able to navigate social situations, being able to reassure other people, kind of read other people's mind, etc. And in autism assessment specifically, there is a lot of emphasis on what do other people observe when the person in question is in social situations, right? So with other people, we mean people around the person who is being assessed in daily life. So if we're talking about kids, it might be their parents, their teachers. If we're talking about adults, it might be their partner or their friends or still their parents to a degree if they have a close relationship. But also the observations of the psychologist or the psychiatrist who is conducting the assessment. If you put that emphasis on how do things look on the outside, right? So how does the person being assessed seem to be performing from the outside in social situations? And the fact that lots of women are very adept at masking, you can see that a difficulty emerges, right? So one thing that I'm quite passionate about is really highlighting this issue for the diagnosis of autism in women and girls. And I think one thing that we need to consider as health professionals is to put more emphasis on the lived experience of women and girls, right? So we need to ask them, how do you feel in social situations, right? So not only how are you performing, but how does it feel inside? When you're managing eye contact, for example, does that come naturally? Does that feel easy? Or is there a sort of script running through your mind that kind of, where you kind of comment on your own behavior and kind of adjust that on an ongoing basis? For example, like, oh, I've been looking at this person for a while, now I need to look away, or I have been looking away for a while, now I might need to make eye contact. And that doesn't just apply to eye contact, that applies to a wide range of behaviors. Interestingly, there is a questionnaire that has been developed. It's called the CAT-Q, the Camouflaging Autistic Traits Questionnaire, that really looks at camouflaging or masking in autistic adults. So that's an interesting, I guess, measure that we can use and that we can incorporate in assessments for neurodivergent women and girls. When we look at the research paper that I mentioned, I find a couple of things that correlate with masking or camouflaging. So they find that the stronger the autism is, right? So the more we fall towards that stronger end of the autism spectrum, the stronger masking can be. Not surprising, right? I guess there's a larger range of behaviors that can be masked or that might need to be masked based on non-flexible environments, very neurotypical environments that are often quite narrow. Another thing is gender that I already touched upon. So masking, camouflaging is more common in women. Education partly relates to masking in the sense that some studies find that people with higher cognitive ability, university educated people, that they engage in masking more readily. One final important thing that I want to touch upon today is that masking is really linked to a number of negative mental health outcomes. So masking often makes people feel like they're being inauthentic, like they can't be themselves. And masking, higher levels of masking and lower levels of being your true self as a neurodivergent individual are linked to higher rates of depression, higher rates of anxiety, and a whole host of other kind of mental health outcomes that are reduced, right? So this is a very interesting paper. I'll put a link to the paper in the comments or in the description for this live feed. Have a look at it if you're interested, and I hope you're all having a good weekend, and I will see you next week for another episode of the Neurodivergent Women Book Club.